Paul Szyarto, welcome to the Human Capital Innovations Podcast.
John, thanks for having me.
It is a pleasure to be with you. I am super excited to be meeting and chatting about AI, deep machine learning, and digital transformation for the future of work. We were just chatting in the pre-interview, getting to know each other a little bit, and you were telling me a little bit about your unique background. And honestly, I think we all tend to have a bit of a zigzag background. It's kind of the rare person that doesn't. My wife is actually one of those rare people. She knew what she wanted to do in high school, and that's what she did, like very straight linear path. But most people aren't that way, I think, and they kind of go all over. And so I'm really interested in hearing more about how you've navigated that in your own career. As we get started, I do want to share Paul's bio with everyone, and then we'll give Paul a chance to share a little bit more about himself. Paul Szyarto is Chief Strategy Officer at Boss AI, owner of PSG, and managing partner at A2E. He is an Oxford University and Wharton Business School educated expert in business operations and technologies, and has spent the last 20 years maximizing the bottom line of more than 1,000 global companies. He is an expert in corporate finance optimization, ERP architecture, and program and project management. In addition, he has personally supported the development of over 40 entrepreneurial assets with a cumulative revenues exceeding $4 billion. Paul is highly sought after for his speaking abilities and insight regarding digital transformation, with more than 200 events under his belt. Clearly a tremendous career, lots of great expertise that you bring to the table for the conversation today. It's a pleasure to be with you. Anything else you would like to share by way of your background or story with me and my listeners before we dive on into the topic for today?
I think my team, when they put that bio together, it sounds better and better every time I hear it. I'm like, wow, I gotta meet this guy. So, but yeah, I mean, that's me. I've done a lot of stuff, and I got my hands in just about everything these days. So.
Very, very cool. Well, why don't we start? You were alluding to in the pre-interview just about your kind of unique path. Tell us a little bit more about that. I'm always interested in that. I've had a unique path myself. I think a lot of listeners have as well. So I'd love to hear more about kind of what got you to where you're at.
So I will say that my call it my career path or my life path actually started in the military. So everybody sits back and they go, wait a second, what are you doing? What are you doing in this domain? I went into the military as a nuclear engineer, trying to focus on reactors, on carriers and subs. And then I finally met someone who works on nuclear reactors and subs, and I was like, wait a second, I gotta share a bunk with this guy. That is not me. I don't want to be on a sub for 6 months, underwater, and this is what it's going to be. So I switched into advanced electronics and had the opportunity to work on things like the precision approach radar, ASOS, like automated surface observation systems, all of these different flight data input systems, SATCOM. So I did that for 4 years, got into a little bit of terrorist tracking when I was in Italy. And then they tried to keep me in the military, and I was like, it just doesn't pay. I'm like giving up my life, and it's just chaotic because it was right after September 11th. So I got out of the military. And honestly, I tried to find a job. No one was hiring ex-military guys. It was really weird. I had an MBA. I did all this military work in electronics. I couldn't find a job that was actually paying anything. So I got into mortgages, and then I finally got a job working with the PEO of the Army doing project management, project controls work. And then 3-4 months into that, I started my first company, and then sold it, started another company, sold it, and then that's kind of where I'm at today. So I am the founder of PS Group Holdings, which is a venture investments private equity firm funded by myself. And we have, I think right now we have 48 assets, so 49 assets that range from restaurants to combative systems to construction management, pharmaceutical management to AI, ML. So, and in my spare time, I'm also the CSO or the Chief Strategy Officer for Boss AI. Boss AI is the first commercialized federated, AI platform within the marketplace. And, I'm supporting the team over there to develop a pretty much a public release model. So it's been a really interesting ride for the past what year is it? 2022.
I have to remind myself of that too. The last 2 years are a bit of a blur, so I have to
it's
remind
just a blur. Everything's going so fast, and even though we're in a pandemic, so much has changed. It is like just insane what's happening in the marketplace these days. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, that's super interesting, and it kind of blows my mind. I was actually talking to another individual a couple of weeks ago who is I don't think he was a nuclear engineer, but he worked on nuclear submarines as a engineer. And this is like the first time I've met 2 different people within a really small window that did that kind of work. That's fascinating in and of itself. It's just a small world, I guess. Well, very interesting. Clearly you have, just a great academic pedigree, well trained. You go into the military, you come out, you start your own businesses, you're doing all these different cool things. And I didn't share, but we also talked in the pre-interview a little bit about how you're involved in teaching at Wharton and doing cool things in that space as well. So you just have your fingers in a lot of pies and doing lots of cool stuff. Well, as we dive on into the topic for today, again, your expertise in AI, deep machine learning, and digital transformation is something that I think will be super relevant to everyone listening, because we know, over the last 2 years of the pandemic, so many companies had to, on a dime, just switch over to virtual work. Most weren't technologically prepared for that, or culturally prepared for that. They just had to figure it out and do the best they could. I think most organizations that survived the pandemic have figured out how to do it at least passively well, but many of those are now trying to get their people back into the office, which frankly, in my opinion, is kind of a silly losing battle to try to go backwards, but that's what some are trying to do. The reality is the pandemic accelerated us into the future of work, the adoption of disruptive technologies, and AI and deep machine learning are just a couple of those technologies. More broadly speaking, digital transformation, I think, is here to stay. It's been a hot topic for years, but even now more than ever, I think organizations have to grapple with how to do this effectively if they hope to stay relevant in the market. So these are the types of things we're going to explore together, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about the role of specifically AI and deep machine learning in the modern and future workforce, and then we can talk more generally about digital transformation.
Yeah, of course. So based on the research I did about you, seems like you're in the domain of human capital management. So everything about human capital. So let's dive into this a little bit. So I'm also quite fascinated with this domain because the next 10 years is going to be really interesting. It's not going to be about, I think it's going to be less interesting about, what new jobs are occurring, but more about human capital displacements due to technology. And that's actually why I'm diving much deeper into the domains of AI, machine learning, because I myself, I want to understand what's coming. What are these organizations building? I mean, where is it going? And what automations and digital transformation, processes are being implemented to actually do what? They're actually being implemented to displace human capital, because human capital is probably the highest cost, variable within organizations. And if we can reduce, human capital or create efficiencies and productivity rates and so on, what happens to our bottom lines? They get inflated, they get better. So I think over the next 10 years, that's the subject every organization should be focusing on, not just a digital transformation, but a strategy to essentially preserve human capital. Where is it going to go? Where are all these people going to go? You have organizations like, let's pick on the law domain, because I didn't mention this, and I don't think but I'm actually about to finish law school, because I feel that is a domain that has been completely untouched. It's very traditional. And someone needs to, change this thing. Someone needs to disrupt the domain with AI. So, and I believe that there's some opportunity within that space. So yeah, I think that's going to be the big topic. What the hell's happening? What's coming? How can you prepare for human capital displacement? I mean, how can you prepare your organization for the tremendous level of disruption that's about to hit? Because, you know, sorry people, but we're slow. You know, we're inefficient. We can't produce at the levels that machines can. You know, if you actually do the comparative analysis of where we're going.
Yeah, that displacement, I think it's clear as day. There's been displacement happening at every stage and wave of the Industrial Revolution. So that's nothing new. Just the different types of technologies being utilized to displace workers is new, right? And so we've seen, you know, robotics and various software packages and have been displacing workers, or at least certain tasks, for forever, right? That's nothing new. With just the rate and the pace of that displacement and disruption is accelerating, and that's what we're going to have to grapple with. And so what do we do with these people who you know, we just don't need to perform those tasks anymore? That's a big question, and there's going to be entirely new jobs and industries and types of careers that we haven't even conceived of yet, that are going to play a huge role. And how do you prepare for a future that's unknown? That's a big part of the question. Organizations, you know, on the human capital front, displacement's a huge piece of it. They're also just wondering, how in the world do we reskill and upskill our workforce in a really tight labor market where we already don't have enough people in STEM, we don't have enough people in technology sectors? How do we get more and more people to do more complex technological work when we're already scrapping, you know, to try to get good people as it is? And the reality is, we're not going to be. Yeah, exactly. We can't. It's just, it's an impossible scenario.
The velocity of displacement is occurring at such a high rate right now, and like organizations like, you know, if you look at the you know, the Apples, the Facebooks, the Amazons, what they're doing is they're hiring resources to actually train these machines. So they're actually hiring you to displace yourself. And I think over the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to have this, you know, this is the learning phase of displacement. And when you start seeing, you know, the Elon Musks of the world, because he's not the only one that's an Elon Musk. I mean, there's a lot of Elon Musks in the world that are going down the path of displacement. I mean, just think of the, you know, autonomous transportation, you know, industry. You know, autonomous cars, autonomous taxis, Ubers, you know, your Tesla picking people up and driving them around because you want to sit home and eat ice cream. You know, just think of the game that we're now starting. I mean, and if you go down the path of the trucking industry, which is a backbone to not just the United States, but, you know, 100 different countries, if you can create autonomous, you know, transportation and trucking and, you know, just complete human capital displacement within that transportation domain, what happens? How many workers is that? I think just in the United States alone, it's something like 12 million workers. You know, so it's like, just think of the numbers that are coming, and if we can start displacing complex, you know, functions like driving a truck, even though we think it's simple, it actually is pretty complex. So, I mean, what the hell are all these people going to do? You know. And the workforce is getting older and older. So you start thinking people that are 40 and above, you know, yeah, let's retrain the workforce. You know, there's two key factors that have to be in play. They have to be willing and able. You know, there may be a lot of people willing to be retrained, but are they able? And I can tell you, man, you know, there's no one at 40 that's gonna go to coding school to learn how to develop AI. You know, Python and R. It's just not happening. So they're being displaced by the younger generation.
Right. So all of that, you know, you've highlighted several things that people managers, organizational leaders, and executives are struggling with and having to wrestle with. It also has broader societal impacts and implications, right? If we have all these people who can't work. It's also interesting, as you were sharing that, though, I also had the thought, you know, there's been quite a bit of research in recent years out of Harvard, MIT, probably out of Wharton, about the workday and the work week and the amount of time, you know, people, especially in the knowledge economy, how much productivity can you actually get out of the average worker in a given day? And it's actually a pretty small amount, like 2 to 3 hours a day.
Yeah, it's
for
like 2.9 hours.
Yeah, for creative, strategic, innovative type of work. And that's the kind of work that we need. And so, as we rethink the nature of work and what the future of work will look like, does it mean that we're just working less? That the day and age of 40, 50, 60 plus hour work weeks, are those going to fade? Are we going to have people having more time to do creative things outside of their careers and their work, and with shorter amounts of focused time on specific things that they want to do? Or will people simply be like you and have like 5 different things spinning at the same time, doing a lot of different things? I think there will be some of that as well. So it's going to be super interesting to see how all this plays out. And I certainly don't know what to expect, but I do think it's pretty obvious that things will not stay the same. Things will not continue the way they've been. And the artifact of like the 8 to 5, I mean, who actually works an 8 to 5 job nowadays? But that artifact of kind of the traditional 8 to 5 workday or the 40-hour plus work week, we're going to have to re-envision, I think, a lot of those things.
See, John, you bring up a really good point, right? So, based on studies, productivity of human capital is right around 3 hours. So people typically waste 66 to 70% of their day on, BS. So if they're being productive only 3 hours in a given day, and you're saying that, maybe we're going to adjust what we're doing and we can allow human capital to be more creative and so on and so on. Now, the biggest challenge is, now you're starting to see this trend, this push within society that is, I don't want to go to college. I don't think university is going to be effective. And, you're starting to see the younger generation essentially avoid, going down the path of high-end, professional degrees and so on. And I think it's actually a major detriment to society because, creativity is a human, it's one of our characteristics. We have the ability to be creative, we're not like a dog, but it's like, what are you going to be creative in? Are we going to draw pictures, or are we going to create, autonomous cars and, write code and create, highly complex, technologies? You can't do that without professional education to understand where it's going. You need to put in the work, the effort to really understand the depths of where this technology is going. And what's funny is, like, we build AI solutions and people go, well, I'm a data scientist. Nobody even knows what a data scientist is until you get into the domain. Everyone thinks they're a data scientist, and they're loosely leveraging a title, and everyone's using this loose title. And people that aren't even educated or professionally educated are going down this path. And what's happening is organizational competence is declining because you don't even have the real creatives. You don't even have the real mathematicians. Nobody's actually putting any effort to, explode the domain of STEM. So that's another thing I'm seeing is, human capital is being displaced. The entire work schedule is being, changed to fit, more humanistic, functions. Okay, let's be creative. But now you have this whole societal push where, we should live and have a lifestyle. We should be able to be free and do what we want. We don't need college, What are we doing? We're actually, like, to me, it feels like we're like suppressing knowledge within within society, which is, I don't know, man. I don't know where these organizations are going to go, but hiring people like me to put in autonomous systems. So,
yeah, well, you bring up some tremendous points, lots to consider and to grapple with for sure. Yeah. Paul, it has just been a real pleasure. I know at the time we're going to wrap up here in just a minute, but before we do, I wanted to give you a chance to share with me, my listeners, how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, your teams, anything else like that you'd like to share, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Anyone who wants to reach out to me, you could always reach me at my site, paulszyarto.com. That's PAULSZYARTO.com, or askboss.ai. Myself and my team, we're over there trying to change the world with artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I would say the statement to kind of sum up where we're at, you can't be content with where you're at. You have to look to the future. of where technology is going, where society is going, and don't fall in line with those who are going to sit around and wait until something happens. Go out there and build your own path, because it's going to get really interesting over the next 10 years.
For sure. And if we're waiting around to see how things change, and then we're just solely reactive to it, guess what? We're going to be caught flat-footed.
Yeah.
The chances of us surviving are pretty slim. So let's be proactive. Let's be strategic. Let's work on these really hard challenges now. It's just like when the pandemic hit. Some organizations were pretty darn well prepared for it, and were able to flip on a dime without too much struggle. Others, I mean, it totally rocked their world, and some of course didn't even survive. And of course, anytime there's disruptive innovations and displacement and all the things we've been talking about, you can't prepare for everything. You can't predict everything. No one's suggesting that, but we have to do our best to try to understand what's happening, where things are going, what the trends are, do our best to look around the corner a little bit, and be proactive about it. And if we can do that, I think we'll be in a better place. In relation to that, I think that fundamentally requires just a growth mindset and kind of a lifelong learning approach and culture within organizations, so that you're constantly agile and adaptive and open to change and adjustment, and not so stagnant and like just digging in your heels trying to keep things the way they've always been. That's the recipe for failure, certainly in the modern workplace, but also in the future of work. Well, Paul, it's been a pleasure. I encourage listeners to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Paul and his team can do for you. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week.